those nuances are just really difficult to respect in a US Western context. And so that's why depending on my place and space that I'm occupying, I will shift my identity to be more authentic in whatever space I'm in, because my identity does shift depending on where I am.
Everybody's learning. Everybody's growing. Everybody's got to start somewhere. How the wise one grows. How the wise one grows.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to How the Wise One Grows. And I am so excited because this is the first episode ever with a guest, and it is a wonderful human that I am very excited to hang out and talk with today, Isabela. But before we get started, mostly for me, I'm going to invite us all to take 3 deep breaths. So wherever you are, just take a moment to land here. And you can gently rest your eyes if it feels safe and supportive for you. Notice where your body meets the earth. Feel your spine lengthen and your shoulders soften. And know that you are held here. Inhale, fill your chest, fill your belly with air. Exhale, open your mouth, let it all out. Inhale, chest and belly expand. Exhale, open your mouth, let it all out. One more big inhale. And exhale. And you can slowly open your eyes and reintegrate to this space. I just got really excited because I got to see Bella's face when I opened my eyes. So I'm going to share the most badass bio ever about Isabela. So Isabela Leonor Rosales is currently pursuing her Ph.D. in religion with a certificate in Latinx Studies in the Joint Doctoral Program with the University of Denver and Iliff School of Theology. I was worried about saying Iliff, not Denver. Isabela is an anti-racist community organizer, an equity advocate in gender-inclusive rights, and has done contract work for the Colorado Organization of Latina Opportunity and Reproductive Rights and Women's Voices for the Earth. She's currently working as a research assistant with both the University of Denver Latino Center for Scholarship and Engagement and the Iliff Institute for Religion, Politics, and Culture. And when she's not engaged in her scholarship and organizing work, she finds nourishment in the outdoors with her 3 dogs or with a black pen in hand to create art that honors identity, intersectionality, decolonization, and transcendence through life-giving encounters with the other. Holy crap. I am so excited.
You did that so beautifully too.
I just think that you are so beautiful. So I'm so excited for this. So Isabela, thanks for joining me today and hanging out with me in the interwebs.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yay. So I just wanted to kind of hold space at the beginning for you to share about your journey. How did you get to who and where you are today? And it doesn't have to be anything too intense. Just what led you to these amazing things you're out there in the world doing?
Well, I grew up in rural Iowa in a really small town, Decorah, Iowa. And I think I was one of just a handful of a member of a Latinx family or Spanish-speaking family.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in an intergenerational home where my abuela, my grandmother, my father's mother, lived with us and helped to raise me. So I think that my consciousness was developed in an intergenerational way and in a multicultural way.
Mm-hmm.
and in an area where I was surrounded by people who didn't necessarily look like me.
Yeah.
And so I think I really I developed those social justice oriented values out of survival,
Mm.
because it was how I was able to make meaning for myself in a place where I often felt unwelcome, or and struggled a lot with bullying, and struggled a lot to make friendships.
Mm.
But then when I entered into the public school system, because I moved around through many different early education settings because I was really struggling to find my voice. Also, growing up in a bilingual home, it was really difficult to succeed in a English dominant speaking school system. But once I got to the public school system and my world opened up a little bit, I met some amazing international students, and I also met and engaged with the theater kids. I think
I
that's what
didn't know you were a theater
oh
person.
yes. That's my first dream, was to be in musical theater.
Wow. So
Yeah,
you can sing.
I can.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Sing. And so I think that, and being in that community, I think there was a lot of queer kids. There was a lot of just socially justice oriented kids because of the kind of musicals that we were exposed to. I would say like Wicked and Rent and Avenue Q, these musicals that had social justice oriented values in them.
Yeah.
So I think that solidified who I was my family, meaning making out of a need for survival in a community where I didn't feel a strong sense of belonging. But then when I did find my pack, my people in high school, in middle school to high school in the public school system, it was the arts.
Yeah.
And so it was in theater, but also in my art classes where I really connected with people. And I'm still really close with a lot of those people to this day. And so I think that really guided me into a liberal arts education, where I then fell in love with religious studies. And it was because of an incredibly diverse faculty at Luther College in my home, Decorah, Iowa. So
Wow.
I think that I gravitated towards that faculty. I gravitated towards their mentorship. And there wasn't a musical theater program at the liberal arts school I ended up going to. That's a whole other story. But I think it was meant to be. And because I fell so deeply in love with the study of religion, the academic rigor of engaging with organized religion, biblical studies, doing like interpretation of texts that I had engaged with in a culturally Catholic context my entire life, doing it in a way that was really liberative. I think it just really added to the social justice oriented values I had developed my entire life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I like really feel that toggle with, and I think a lot of people have experienced around that college time of like, you're really interested in this type of art and you get to college and you fall in love with other academic fields, but there's not so much space for that art. And that can be like a little bit of a mourning, I feel, that happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you engage with musical theater anymore?
I think in my car.
Yeah. That
no,
totally counts.
But I do, before the pandemic, I was singing at different churches and church choirs here in Denver.
Yeah.
So I do try to sing for, I've sang at memorial services. I worked in a nursing home for a while as an activity coordinator and sang to the folks that lived in the nursing home.
Oh my gosh.
So I really do try to integrate it into my life as much as possible.
Yeah.
But for me, singing transformed into something that was more so for me or to share and connect with people in a way that wasn't in a monetary sense.
Yeah.
So that was a transformation that happened for me. And I think I also started leaning more into the two-dimensional artwork as a mode of self-expression that I could really like naturally integrate into my academic pursuits as well.
Yeah, that's something I'm super excited to like touch on more, because you do just some beautiful ink drawings. I don't think I know really the full scope of your 2D art right now.
My two-dimensional artwork started out as just doodles in class.
Yeah.
I was trained in high school. I took a lot of art classes, and it was something that I really thrived in. And it was something in high school that was just really fun. And then it was something that helped me stay engaged in the classroom in college. And now it's something I do for myself, but also I try to integrate it into classwork. I try to incorporate my drawings into different papers that I write or presentations that I do. And I also do commissioned work for people. I've done a business card and I've designed some tattoos.
That's amazing.
And I've just done some pieces for couples, like an anniversary present. And just at this point, it's really just with my close friends and connections. I haven't poured a lot of time into it because
Yeah.
I think similarly, it's something that is a mode of self-expression for me. And my process is just with an ink pen, a black ink pen, and I don't use any pencil first. I only use the black ink pen. And I think for me, it is, as someone who grew up in a multicultural family and an immigrant family, I think that there's an expectation to be very successful. And so even though my family is very loving, very supportive in whatever I do, I think there is that pressure on, I feel internally, to be perfect. And so for me, the artwork is really helpful because if I make a mistake, I have to roll with it.
Yeah.
And it's been a practice for me to then also to embrace that in my day-to-day as well.
I am in love with what you just said. And I like feel similar. Like, I definitely feel that. I think there's something with migrant families as like, it took so much work to get there. And there's like kind of a constant survival mode that becomes like embedded within us. And I have a really hard time like trying to, I'm always loved and supported by my family. I feel very fortunate in that. And I feel this like internal voice and internal pressure. And I think that's maybe why I really like clay, working with ceramics as well, because it's like you're not in total control and you have to learn to like listen to the wobbles and just create with it and flow with it, and kind of, it's not going to be this rigid perfect thing. It's just going to be what the earth wants you to create with it.
Yeah.
But I just think it's really beautiful how you have held a good balance of like letting your art trickle in as you've explored these like really other deep parts of yourself and passions that you have, like how you've continued to hold space for that healing as a way of connecting it to the other things you're doing. I think that interconnection is really beautiful.
Yeah, I make a point of drawing mostly naked female gendered bodies. But I and sometimes I do faces, but I like to, I mean, this is a style that's pretty popular. A lot of people do kind of flowers or plants or anything coming out of the bodies of people. I think that I try to incorporate intentionally like a sensuality between the bodies to honor my queer identity. And I think I also try to, I'm very intentional about what kind of plants I'm putting in. If it's for me, the drawing's just for me, I generally will do indigenous Mexican plants, nopales and dahlias, corn, maíz. And if it's a commissioned piece for somebody else, I might ask them, where are you from, or what geographical area do you feel a strong connection with? And then I might do some research of like, what are the indigenous plants of that area? And so that's kind of how I represent the individuality in each piece.
That's beautiful. It's a great way to honor the land and like the native people of the land as well. How did you, is that something that your abuela passed on to you, or where did that like knowledge and connection get sparked?
So my abuela was actually, because of her situation of living in the United States, she actually, what she showed me was a shame of her own culture, unfortunately. And I think that she wanted to distance herself from her identity and from her land as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think it represented a lot of pain for her. And she had her reasons for coming to the United States, for leaving her family, for leaving
Yeah.
an abusive husband, and for doing that journey when she was in her early 20s, so younger than me. She
Mm-hmm.
had her reasons, and I respect them, and I understand why she was so, because she did pass away, but why she was so against her culture and
Yeah.
to embrace whiteness as much as possible. So I think that was represented to me, and I did internalize that, and I did try to gravitate towards whiteness. So in a lot of ways, my drawings, my academia, and the way that I do community organizing work right now is me leaning more into my Mexican and Indigenous identity.
Mm-hmm.
But I do still identify as white. My mother is white. Has European ancestry
Yeah.
from Norway. So I do try to honor both sides of my identity in authentic ways that aren't appropriative or harmful to other communities.
This is stuff I want to talk to you so much about. Because I noticed, like, my dad came to the US when he was very young, and for him, like, he even changed his name because, like, his name is Michel, but no one could really say that, and in school he kind of got, like, fed up with expressing that wasn't how you said his name, and now his name is Michelle. Like, he just thought, that's easier. Sure, it sounds like I have, like, what people might think to be a girl name, but it was easier than the constant, like, explanation of it. And he's reflected on that to me in the past of, like, yeah, that's a part of something that I wish I held on to a little more. And when I was young, like, we would speak Spanish in the house more. I think I was, like, I'm embarrassed by the poor quality, I think, of my Spanish speaking versus what I wish it was. Because when I was young, I got embarrassed about it and I, like, wouldn't speak it. And now I guess it's going to lend into the next question I ask you, because I don't think I know how to identify anymore in a way that is, like, non-appropriative. Like, I don't know. I'm Lebanese. I'm Hispanic. I'm white. I don't know what I am. Like,
I think that is a common issue for any Latin identity,
mm-hmm.
because we have been over essentialized. Our identities have been oversimplified in a US and Western context for so long, when in reality, we are such a diverse group of people. I highly recommend you watch Latin History for Morons on Netflix. It's
Okay.
I highly
Latin
recommend.
History for Morons. I'm going to put that in the podcast notes.
Yeah. It's on Netflix. It's
Okay.
great. And I think that because we have been over essentialized in a US Western context, we're really confused as to how to identify ourselves when we come from various continents and countries, and then communities within those countries, within those continents. So
Yeah.
I think that in a US Western context, it's really difficult to identify ourselves. When I go to Peru, or when I've gone to Colombia or Ecuador, they ask me where I'm from, and I say, oh, like, soy mexicana, I'm Mexican. And that's it. That comes with an entire cultural understanding that maybe we share some similarities, but we're from entirely different continents, countries.
Yeah.
Whereas in the United States, I might be next to a Peruvian, and we might be lumped into the same category as we're both, Latinas or Latinos or Latinx,
Yeah.
depending on the context. And we have entirely different indigenous and colonizer ancestries. So I think that those nuances are just really difficult to respect in a US Western context. And so that's why depending on my place and space that I'm occupying, I will shift my identity to be more authentic in whatever space I'm in, because my identity does shift depending on where I am.
That's such a beautiful thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I guess, can you share, like, how you identify, like, what you would say and how that might shift in different spaces, and also, like, how you came upon those terms? Like, how do you resonate with, this is how I identify in this space?
So a lot of my identity formation I have to credit to academia, but also to my dad. I think my dad and I both have done a lot of identity reconstruction, reclamation, decolonization work together, because
That's amazing.
in my academic journey, and since his mother passed away, I think we both have been able to do some healing and some identity reclamation that was both, internally in the family, but also externally imposed upon us to be ashamed of our identities. And so I think in the last 10 years, we both have done a lot of healing. Right now I identify, and it's changed so many times, but right now I do identify as either a white Latina, I'll identify as a queer Latina, I'll identify as a Mexican American, I'll identify as, sometimes I'll put Latinx, and even though my pronouns are she, her, hers, I do so just to honor and normalize the reality that there are gender identities that fall along the spectrum. And so those identifiers do shift depending on my context. I think that it's important for me to name my whiteness, I think maybe is what you're most curious about. I think it's really important for me to name my whiteness because when I do go to my family in Mexico, I am la güera, which means the white one, the fair-skinned one, the light-skinned one. And it has a connotation of beauty in my culture.
Yeah.
And so, and that is internalized, anti-Blackness. And so for me, culturally, and in order to be to be authentically anti-racist, I feel like I do need to own my whiteness because I do benefit from my light skin, both in my culture and in the United States. I benefit from my whiteness, from my proximity to whiteness because of my mother and because of the way I look. However, at the same time, I grew up in rural Iowa and I was definitely not treated as a white person because I was surrounded by much lighter skinned people. And so I think because of my ethnicity, my bilingual abilities, and my intergenerational home, having like an abuela or a dad with an accent dropping me off at school, I definitely was not treated as a white person. However, now as I've left that community, I have experienced more diverse communities where I am treated like a white person. It changes depending on where I am geographically. And so I do honor my whiteness because in that way it I feel honors and acknowledges the privileges that I hold.
I think that's a really beautiful way to handle that. That's something I've struggled with a lot because I'm like, yes, I have these Latinx roots in some way, but I don't know, it feels wrong to use them because I look white, I haven't suffered or experienced racism in these ways that so many people are very much dealing with every day. And I did come from a migrant family, and there are levels of privilege that are very different than a lot of other white people. So it's something where it's you want to honor that part of yourself, but doing it in a respectful way. So adding white to that is beautiful. I still have to figure out the Lebanese, Hispanic, all of the balances, but those are really beautiful things to think about.
And I think that I wanted to touch on something you said, that I think that there's this social consciousness that in order to identify as Latinx, one has had to have suffered. And when in reality, there are so many thriving and happy and fulfilled Latinx folk.
Yeah.
And so I don't, for me, Latinx and white do not cancel each other out. And one refers to my ethnicity and my geographical heritage, and the other refers to the literal color of my skin. And so I think in honoring that, I don't think one has to cancel the other out. And there is space because of our very unique colonizer heritage, because of the conquistadors that came to the Americas, as we call them now, we have a very hybrid mixed identity. And so I can't necessarily, just because I identify as Latina doesn't mean I can't also identify as white. There's space for both because that's my geographical and historical legacy of colonization. So I think that the idea that I can't identify as Latinx because I don't suffer like other Latinx folks, that might paint a picture that all Latinx folks are suffering. And that's not true. That's not true. They're thriving. And actually, they're a rising population in the United States and are an incredibly important demographic. So I think that that's a single story narrative that I also have internalized of like, oh, I can't call myself Latina because I'm not suffering like my Latinx siblings. But that's a narrative that I've accepted from the US Western context that, well, of like illegal alien jargon or like children in cages, these stories that we see in the news that are depicting my people as just as suffering. And yes, that's happening. Yes, there is suffering. That doesn't mean that I can't identify with that community. And so when you identify with that community, what am I doing to uplift them is more my question. Or what am I doing in my day-to-day that I'm representing my community in a liberating way? That's more my concern than am I suffering enough to identify this way?
Yeah, no, that's I'm so glad you named that, because that is something that like is clearly just so in the jargon of the world that it becomes embedded, and we're not like having someone shine that light of awareness onto it can really help you reframe. And I really love the way in which like you allow things to hold both and like juxtapositions to like be there, because that's real. Like all things are one, all in my opinion, and like each holds both. So allowing space for both to exist is just honesty that we often like our minds aren't trained to interpret the world in that way. We're like trained to see it in this box or that box, but the truth is there's always overlap.
Yes.
So holding those two in one is really beautiful. It's kind of going to lead me into so you identify as queer Latina sometimes, and you're in a heterohomogenous relationship, and how has that like holding both experience been? You're not alone in that. There are so many people, and I think it's something that doesn't get as much light as I wish it did.
Yeah, I think I came from such a loving, supportive family. So I need to acknowledge that I was given the space to really develop my sexuality and my gender identity in the ways that were most life-giving to me. And that was because of my parents. I think I also have to credit the theater community and the friendships that I had as a child and growing up. I think that allowing space for that exploration in children is so important. And I think that it's a failure of dominant culture and society that and I say that kind of collectively, even though I know I don't want to overgeneralize, but as a society in a US context, I feel like the heteronormative messaging is so intense on children, and through Disney, through other forms of media, through the nuclear family units that they see all the time in school systems, where there's maybe one exception, there's one non-hetero family unit. And I think it's it really hurts that is our reality, because and that queerness or sexual identity, sexuality, gender identity formation are considered mature content when we are just shoving the heteronormative messaging down our younger generations constantly. I feel so honored that my parents did not do that to me and gave me space to really explore my sexual identity and be honest with me about what I was feeling inside. from a very young age. I've been a very sexually curious person. And I think that for many young Latinas too, it's our first methodology of resistance. To be queer or to be bisexual it is almost inherently deviant in a culture that really upholds like Marianismo, which is, the Virgin Mary is the pinnacle of womanhood, and so we be like her. And so any kind of like deviation from that heteronormative course it can function as a method of resistance. Fortunately for me, again, I think I had that in more extended families. But my nuclear family unit, my mother and father, were very supportive of my sexual exploration. So I think that's why I'm comfortable acknowledging my queer identity as I'm bisexual. And I've had wonderful relationships with both men and women. And I happen to be in a heterosexual relationship right now, with Alan, who you know.
Love Alan.
We love Alan. And I had to be very honest with him about my identity and my sexual formation. I think as you grow intimate with someone, that's something that you talk about. But I wish that we talked about it outside of those situations.
Yeah.
I wish that it was something that, like in my family, I wish everyone could experience that kind of open space to explore your sexual identity, because it is something that is so integral to your identity as you grow and as you mature. And and so I could go on about that, but
Well, I have one question. It sounds like your parents just did a really beautiful job holding that space, and I wonder like how. And there might not be a specific example for that, but if there was anything they did in which to help you feel supported that people can like resonate with, like, here are things we can do to create a more supportive and inclusive community for our loved ones, our immediate circles, and beyond.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it just brings back really positive formative memories for me.
That's beautiful.
The first is I remember asking my dad at a very young age what sex was. And he told me it was something that happened between two people who had a strong, intimate, or loving connection with each other. And I said, well, what kind of people? And he said, any people, anybody who experiences a loving, strong, physical bond with somebody will have sex. And I mean, I'm 5 years old.
That's beautiful.
Like, okay. And so I think it just developed from there. And then my mother did a really excellent job of never shaming me for my process, my sexual development and formation. I think she knew early on that I had deeper feelings for the women in my life. And I think when she realized that, we were able to talk about it really openly. And she was able to talk to me about just respecting other people's boundaries and making sure I'm getting consent for the kind of touching I want to do. And she was just very intentional about, guiding me in a way that was safe and honoring of my body and other people's bodies. But she didn't shame me for the source, if that makes sense. She was,
it sounds like they did a really good job of like not labeling who or whatever, but more of like the great emotions and how we honor a person and a soul, no matter what form that those things take.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what amazing parents. I would like to meet your parents one day.
I don't have like I'm not coming from an anti-queer family or a homophobic family. So like nuclear wise, I do have homophobic relatives, but my parents were able to raise me in a context where I did not have to feel ashamed for the feelings I was having. So I'm very grateful. Yeah.
And they're just loving parents that could see you and just like meet you and love you where you're at. And I guess at the end of the day, for anyone, that's all we can try to do is just truly see someone and see their soul, and then just like help their soul grow and just be there to love it. I love that. Okay. This is a word that I had to Google from your bio. Transcendence sounds magical from what I was like reading, but I would love for you to explain like what is transcendence and how is identity important and how does it play into that?
That's another great question.
I have so many for you. I'm obsessed.
I think transcendence has several connotations for everybody. I think in a US Western context, it's difficult to talk about transcendence without having like an up-down image schema. And that's vocabulary I'm borrowing from one of my mentors. But and and so I think it's difficult to see transcendence in our context as something outside of that. For me, when I'm using the word transcendence, it's a word that has helped me to describe the process of social consciousness raising. So again, it's still on that up-down image scheme, which I've been working in a decolonizing way to disrupt and try to make it more circular than up and down. So maybe transcendence is the wrong word, but for now, given my Euro-Christian worldview that has developed in the United States, transcendence for me is how are we raising our social consciousness in ways that are life-giving in encounters with others, with other people, with other beings, with the other is what I say in my bio, it's what I say in my art. And I think in doing that, I'm honoring also that transcendence is also acknowledging that upon meeting anyone else, we are othering them and honoring that when that othering happens, if we can acknowledge that, I do believe we can transcend out of harmful othering and just embracing the unique integrity of the differences that we find in each other. That's part of, and so transcendence for me, not only is it social consciousness raising, but it's also my method of anti-racist organizing.
That's so beautiful. I'm always probably going to try to bring things back to this in my head because it's my worldview, but like that is something I have found mindfulness to be really helpful with, is it's like this acknowledging of the lens and the framework through which you view the world. And in that acknowledgement of it, you accept that like this isn't necessarily the true picture, this is just the picture I'm seeing, this is the framework I have. And you know, over time, hopefully we can but we can never unsee things from the way we're culturally brought up to see them. So we at least can become aware of like, yes, this is how I was trained to view things. And by that awareness, you can maybe like step to the side of the window for a second. Does that sound like it falls into that at all?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's really beautiful. So I guess like identity is just threaded into that completely.
Yeah, I think because with that awareness comes an acknowledgement of all of your identities as well. I'm a big advocate of, again, this is borrowing some of my mentors' language and vocabulary, but I'm a big advocate of an ethics of place, which basically admonish people to acknowledge their social locations when engaging in social justice work, community organizing work, or even academic work in religious studies. I think it's really important to acknowledge our social locations. And that just means identifying ourselves racially, ethnically, what kind of education we've had, where we grew up geographically, and where our ancestors are from. And so engaging in that ethics of place is 100% wrapped up in identity.
Yeah.
And so I think, honoring the process of identity formation through that transcendent piece, I think helps us to show up better in our communities and in other communities in ways that are life-giving and authentic.
That's beautiful. Something I want to like circle back on is you talked about at first with transcendence, it being this like growing up almost maybe of that energy and trying to make it expand out and more to a circle. I guess my question comes around like, how can we make that more circular shift to make it more inclusive and less hierarchical?
I think that what we would be treading into here, which is unique to my identity process, is the collision of an indigenous worldview with a Euro-Christian one. And that's not going to be the same for everybody. I've been mentored and have studied in a way that has encouraged me to believe, though I could change, that our worldviews cannot necessarily be changed. We have been raised in a Euro-Christian dominant worldview system. I will, in many ways, always operate in that way. But that does not mean that I cannot learn from an indigenous worldview, which is more circular, collateral, egalitarian, less hierarchical. It doesn't mean I can't learn from it, my indigenous ancestry, that indigenous worldview. Though I was not raised in it, I can't necessarily claim now I have an indigenous worldview. But my ideologies can shift, my values can shift. Within my Euro-Christian dominated worldview, I can allow myself to be moved by the ideologies arising from my indigenous ancestry. Unfortunately, because of colonization, kind of that internalized familial shame, I was not raised in an indigenous community. I was raised in a culturally Catholic community. And so that indigenous reclamation, that internal decolonization, those are all forming parts of my values and my ideologies. But I feel like I have an ethical obligation to honor that I still operate and even thrive in a Euro-Christian worldview. I don't feel harmed by I have never felt harmed by a Euro-Christian worldview. That's something that could change as I continue my decolonization process. Everyone, I think, is on a different step in their decolonization process. I mean, and when I say everyone, I am referring to people with indigenous ancestry. So it's complicated. And I don't think that there is an easy answer, and I don't think that there ever will be. I think that decolonization and changing values, shifting values and ideologies to be more collateral, more circular, more egalitarian, that might be a lifelong process for me, at least.
Yeah. I think probably for all of us and probably many lives will have to go through that work. Wow, you just blow me away with the way in which you speak about these things from such a space of grounding. It's amazing.
Thank you.
So something else that you are clearly a badass, like anyone listening, it's evident. And like the way that I've gotten to know you, which has sadly been like mostly virtual, is like through these amazing adventures and what seems like this like really vibrant and whole life that you live. Like those of you who don't know Isabela, like she and Alan are going on adventures all the time. You've got 4 dogs, like you are exploring the world, climbing all over the place, and you're someone who's doing such profound, impactful work in the world, and you're clearly very passionate about it. And I think something that I find maybe I do, and I don't think I'm alone in this, is like sometimes I get so focused on the goal or the thing I'm passionate about and the thing I want to grow that I don't hold the space for that life and that joy and having that balance of both. And maybe this is all like, social media projections on you, but I guess my question is more like, what has your experience been like with that?
That I love that question because I feel like people want to ask me all the time for all of these adventures and all of this traveling. But I think obviously the pandemic shifted the way that community organizing work is being done, and has given me the ability to work remotely. And so a lot of the work that I do is remote, over Zoom or over phone calls, or the research that I do, I can do from home, or I can do from anywhere, essentially.
Yeah.
So in the last year, as restrictions are being lifted, and more people are vaccinated, I have done more traveling and more adventuring. And I also live in Denver, Colorado, which is just a very beautiful place with access to like very beautiful grand vistas and hikes. And so I think, and I live a very active lifestyle. And so it's easy for me to hop on a beautiful trail. And I think taking photos and videos is a way I de-stress and decompress, and enjoying the company of my dogs and my partner. And yeah, I think that there is an element of, these are just the highlights. my Instagram functions as, look at this adventure I've done, look at my dogs, look at my partner, look at these this outdoor recreation that we're doing. And that's something that Alan and I have had to have done a lot of internal reflection on, because we're both showing up in these predominantly white spaces, these white recreation spaces, like skiing and rock climbing. We go to the gym or we go to the resort, we go backcountry skiing, and I could count on one hand the amount of people of color I see. And usually Alan is one of them.
Yeah.
And so for people who don't know, Alan is a Chinese American, or American born Chinese, first generation. So we've had, like I said, we've had to do a lot of reflection on, these things give us such life, but I really feel disconnected from my family and from my community when I engage in these things, because I don't necessarily see them present. So I think because Alan and I are both so active, we have so much energy, it's a way for us really to connect and bond. I think our intimate connection flourishes when we're doing an activity together, whether that be rock climbing or skiing or traveling. That's how we connect. So again, I think Instagram is like my highlight reel of the greatest parts of my relationship. And my dogs.
Very key element.
But there is a lot of reflection behind every post and behind every adventure of, when we enter into a different country or different community, like how can we support that community? How can we if we want to get a guide for a rock climbing trip, we want it to be a local guide, and we want to support. We recently were climbing in Mexico because we were there for a family wedding, and we had this local Mexican guide, and it was it was a lady rock climbing. So it was
yes
for me to have a lady badass rock climbing Mexican guide. I was like, wow, I feel so seen in ways that I don't in the United States. So, we're really trying to do these recreative activities, yes, in other countries, but trying to support communities where we feel affinity with. And it's been really healing, I think, in reclaiming our love and our belonging in these community or in these recreative spaces, which are so white dominated in Colorado. And Alan's actually kind of shifting his career path to do some work with Big City Mountaineers. And he volunteers for Cruxing in Color in Denver, which is like a climbing advocacy group for people of color or ethnically diverse folks in the climbing community in Denver. So there are movements happening, and Alan and I, but mostly Alan, are getting more involved in that realm. So, I think our hope is that in like the next 5 years, we can kind of be this like, I mean, I'm using this word because you did this, like badass social justice couple. That's like,
hell yeah.
I think that's like our goal. And so, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but how do I make time for all of that? Again, I think I do my work from anywhere, but I do have to say, and my mentors wouldn't be happy about this, that I do prioritize my significant other and my family over my work. And so if I have to sacrifice an hour of work in order to engage with my family or go on a hike with Alan, I do that more often than not. And I am intentional about that because I do my work better when I take that time to connect with the people I love and with the activities that I love. And because we have this one life and I want to do the work that I'm passionate about. And the way that I'm passionate about it is by engaging in these activities that for me are really life-giving, and help me connect with my loved one, with Alan, and with our chosen family, with these dogs. And we do a lot of traveling with his family and to see my family. And so I think I'll continue to prioritize that because it does fuel my ability to show up authentically in the other spaces I care about.
Yeah, and I think that's like there's that element certainly where like giving time to like care for yourself and enjoy your life helps improve our productivity. And it's like you said, like this is our life that we're here for. So if we're not living it, we're denying ourselves our wholeness. We're here for more than just work, and allowing yourself to open up to that makes a lot of sense, that it like improves the other things that bring you life and joy, because then you get to be whole. But if you're just trying to like work all the time, I need to create this or do that, we don't let life flow through us so much because we're not actually living life. We're like becoming like a product or like a production machine versus like a vessel that this life moves through, and being open for all the ways that can hold things and create things. And something I've been thinking a lot lately about. This conversation, I feel like I could go on forever with. I'm having so much fun. I really hope that we get to go to Hawaii and talk forever.
Yes, I heard about that. Yes.
Yes. But I guess I have maybe two final questions that we'll leave with. And one would be this experience of our identity and transcendence and all of these really impactful things you're talking about. Maybe what is like one place that people can start to better honor identity?
I think my answer would change depending on who was asking, depending on what identities I see them holding. And so I think to generalize it might be difficult, but I guess I'll start with my community. If someone from my community asked me, I'm struggling with my identity formation, where can I start? I think that there is so much knowledge in our families and in our hopefully in the generations, the older generations that may or may not still be with us, asking questions. I think that I was able to explore the crevices and the unique hybridities of my identity, because I had, even though there was problems with my abuela's identity formation, I would say, and because of the internal shame she held, I was close enough with her that I asked her so many questions about her life and her journey to the United States. And I know the intimate details of where she's coming from. And I think it's really important that while we have and this might be just a very culturally motivated ideal, but while we can, to engage with our elders as much as possible and ask them questions about the lives they had before they were our elders, because it did help me understand my life, the circumstances of my life, and the way that I was raised in asking those questions. So I think to start, just ask questions of the people who raised you, helped raise you. It could be family, it could not be. And I think that really began, for me at least, the development of my identity.
That's really beautiful. And I think it makes me like, yeah, I'm going to call my grandma after this.
Yeah.
I really love that. So just to leave people with, how can we continue to support you and your activism and your art?
Thank you. I love that you're uplifting my work in that way. I'm just happy to engage and to talk. And as long as it's in a life-giving way and it's in an honoring way. So I'm happy to share my Instagram handles with people. If people want to follow me on Instagram, that's fine. I'm pretty responsive on there because, like I said, I love photography and videos, and I like to post there. It's like my decompressing zone. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of there. But you can also email me for more serious things.
That's amazing. Do you mind saying your handles, because I don't remember them?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So my art page handle is Isabela Makes Art. And then my personal is just my full name, Isabela Leonor Rosales, just my full name. I think that there were a lot of Isabela Rosaleses somehow. So I had to go with my full long name. And then my email is irosales@iliff.edu.
Awesome. Thank you so freaking much. I feel like I could talk to you forever, and I hope that I get to talk to you so much more.
Yes, I hope so too, Holly. This was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So as we close our time together today, I want to hold a little bit of space to pause and reflect on some of the really profound things that Isabela brought up today in regards to identity. So this is a little bit of a practice I have spent time sitting with myself since my conversation with Isabela, and I'd like to hold space for you to step into it as well. So take a moment to just land wherever you are. Feel where your body meets the earth. Inhale, fill your chest, fill your belly with air. And exhale, open your mouth, let it all out. And take a moment now to maybe think about what boxes you place yourself in. Like, what's that sheet in front of you and those boxes that you check off beside on a chart? And maybe think about for a moment, why do you place yourself in those boxes? How do those boxes support you? How do those boxes limit you? And now take a moment to really pick one box and think about how it makes you feel. Does it make you feel constricted? Does it make you feel confused, understood, free? Maybe notice what it might feel like in your body. Does it feel hot, warm, tense, relaxed? Inhale. And exhale. And I'd like us to all hold a bit of space as we move into our day, our week, whatever's next, to think about one thing that you can do to step outside of that box. Maybe make it feel more like you. And maybe if you don't know where to start with that, you start with a question. Maybe to a relative or someone around you who is in that box you imagine as well. So I'll leave you with a few words I wrote in reflection to this conversation. People are not defined by the boxes we construct inside the mind. Don't limit yourself or anyone else with 4 little lines. You and me expand beyond the mountains, the clouds, and the seas. Open up to the depths of identity. Inhale and exhale. Thank you all so much for holding this little extra space to turn into you and kind of listen and reflect here, and for listening to the great wisdom that Isabela had to share. I'm so excited to be back with another wonderful guest with you soon. And until then, let's keep taking it one breath at a time. Thank you all for taking time to pause and listen to the wise one inside of you today. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast to help it grow. Until the next time, let's keep taking it one breath at a time.